I held the box in my hands, still damp from the sea breeze that clung to the villa walls. It was wrapped in rose gold paper, soft satin ribbon tied with the kind of precision only someone who knew me would care to perfect. "It's from Lila," I said, half smiling. My voice was light, but my stomach felt strange. I hadn't heard from her since the wedding. No texts, no calls, just silence wrapped in expensive perfume. James stepped out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, skin still glistening from the shower. He stopped mid-step when he saw the box. His expression changed. Slowly, but unmistakably. His jaw tensed. His eyes didn't blink. "Don't open it," he said quietly, almost too calm. "Megan, please. Don't." I blinked, caught off guard. "It's just a gift. It's from Lila." "No," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "Don't you see it?" My fingers froze on the ribbon. My heart paused like it was holding its own breath. I looked down at the box again, this time not with affection, but caution. What was I supposed to see? It was beautiful. Perfect. Familiar. Too familiar. 3 days earlier, I walked down the marble steps of the oceanfront villa in a lace robe that shimmered under the morning sun. My bare feet patted over the cool stone, and I could still feel the ghost of last night's laughter on my skin. We were only 2 days into the honeymoon, but I'd already memorized the sound of James's laugh in this place. Deep, unhurried, new. This was supposed to be my soft beginning. The wedding had been a dream. Everything I wanted and more. White orchids, jazz quartet, a kiss under string lights, and Lila standing beside me in champagne silk, her hand tight around mine when I whispered, "I can't believe it's real." We had been best friends since 8th grade. There was no version of my life that didn't include her. From sneaking wine coolers into senior prom to holding my hand after Dad's funeral, Lila was constant. But something shifted in her at the wedding. I didn't want to admit it. Not then. Not with all the cameras and champagne and smiles. But it was there. She clung to James's compliments like they were gold dust, laughed too loud at his jokes, asked him questions she already knew the answers to. I brushed it off, blamed it on the open bar, on nerves, on nostalgia. But late that night, I caught her staring at us. Him, mostly, while we danced. Her expression unreadable, like she was taking inventory, like she was watching something she thought should have been hers. So when the box arrived, hand-delivered by the concierge with a card that read, "For your honeymoon glow, love you always, Lila," I swallowed the unease. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I knew her better than anyone. James didn't think so. His eyes didn't move from the box. "I've seen this before," he said, voice low. "Same paper, same ribbon, in her bag, the week before the wedding." I looked at him, confused. "So what? She probably bought it early." He shook his head once. "No, it wasn't wrapped. It was open. She was looking at something in it, something she closed real fast when I walked in." Now the silence felt loud. The ocean outside, once romantic, calming, now sounded like static. My heart started building its own rhythm, slow and wary. "I'm probably being paranoid," he said, but didn't step back. "Just don't open it yet. Not until we're sure." "Sure of what?" I set the box on the edge of the nightstand. Suddenly it looked sharp. Alien. My mind started filling with possibilities I didn't want. Why hadn't she called? Why no text after the wedding? Why send a box instead of a simple "hope you're having the time of your life"? I reached for the ribbon. James gently put his hand on mine. "We need to talk." This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I had played this moment in my head for months. Me and James, in some dreamy resort far away from everyone. No noise, no obligations, no more planning. Just us. But now I felt a wedge sliding in between us. Small, invisible, and shaped like her name. Lila. Lila, who helped me pick the dress. Lila, who once said, "If he hurts you, I swear I'll bury him." Lila, who told me, 2 weeks before the wedding, "You're the lucky one." Not, "You deserve this." Not, "I'm so happy for you." "You're the lucky one." And she'd said it with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I walked out to the patio, needing air. The sky was turning gold, the kind of evening light that makes everything look softer than it really is. The waves licked the shore in steady rhythm. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to forget the box, but I couldn't. James joined me a few minutes later. He wrapped a towel around my shoulders, but said nothing. "Do you think she meant harm?" I asked finally. He didn't answer right away. Then, "I think she wants to remind you that she was here first." I didn't respond. I didn't have words. But deep down, I knew he wasn't wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan above our bed, listening to the slow turning blades like a clock ticking down. The box sat across the room, unopened, unmoving, but I could feel it watching me, pulling at my thoughts like thread unraveling. I reached for my phone and opened Lila's Instagram. Nothing. No posts since the wedding. No stories. No updates. She was gone. Digitally. Emotionally. Vanished like the final scene in a play that ended too fast. Until I saw it. One single like. On a photo of me and James at the altar. From an account I didn't recognize. A burner maybe. No profile picture. No posts. But the username made my blood go cold. Mrs. Lila James. I stared at the screen, frozen. My breath caught in my chest. Was it a joke? Some sick prank? Or was this the truth she hadn't said? The thing she buried under smiles and champagne. I got up slowly, walked to the nightstand and stared at the box. The ribbon shimmered under the soft bedside light, like it was daring me to pull. I didn't open it. I picked it up and carried it outside, my hands shaking. And just as I was about to toss it in the bin, I noticed something underneath the ribbon, pressed almost flat into the wrapping paper. A faint line. No, a tear. Resealed. Poorly. James was right. It had been opened before. My stomach dropped. Before the box, before the silence, before the cracks in the ribbon. There was just me, Lila, and a world where I never imagined her capable of harming me. I've always believed in loyalty. Not the loud kind, the real kind. The kind that sits with you in hospital waiting rooms at 2 a.m., or covers for you when you miss work, or memorizes how you take your coffee without asking. That's what Lila was to me. We weren't just best friends. We were each other's emergency contacts, next of kin in spirit, and mirrors that never distorted. It was always understood that we'd be in each other's lives, forever. Weddings, babies, breakups, promotions. The full timeline. That was our promise. And I never doubted it. We met in the girls' locker room in middle school. I was the quiet one with braces and uneven bangs. She was already magnetic at 13. Funny, pretty, wild in a way I secretly admired. She tossed me a spare hair tie when mine snapped mid-gym class, and somehow, that one gesture spiraled into 20 years of friendship. We survived college together, roommates in a roach-infested apartment, sharing frozen meals and oversized dreams. We got matching tattoos on spring break, a small crescent moon on our wrists. She said we were like tides, pulling each other through life. After college, she bounced from job to job, mostly in fashion retail, always chasing something shinier. I went corporate, marketing, steady hours, dental plan. She teased me about it, said I was domesticating too early, but when I met James at a friend's engagement party, she was the first to say, "He looks like someone who could carry your softness." James was safe, in the best way. He was thoughtful in quiet, consistent ways. He remembered the brand of almond milk I liked. He wrote me notes in the margins of his novels. He met Lila and treated her like an extension of me. Friendly, respectful, never flirty. At first, they got along. I actually loved that. It made things easier. She joined us on hikes, brunches, movie nights. Sometimes she'd roll her eyes when we were overly affectionate, but she always laughed after, called us disgustingly cute. But over time, little things started to feel off. She began pointing out his flaws in ways that weren't jokes anymore. Doesn't he get a little too intense when he talks about his job? Are you sure you want to settle now? You're only 30. There's so much you haven't done. You used to be more fun before, James. I laughed those off. I assumed she was just adjusting, afraid of being left behind. I even reassured her one night, wine drunk on my couch. You'll always have a place in my life, no matter what. She looked at me, glass half raised, and said, as long as I'm not replaced. I laughed. She didn't. Still, I ignored it. Because that's what we do with people we love. We excuse, we rationalize, we bend. I'd made Lila my foundation, and I didn't want to believe she was cracking underneath. Planning the wedding was supposed to be our dream project. We'd always talked about it growing up. Pinterest boards before Pinterest was a thing. Lila took charge of the bachelorette weekend in Palm Springs. She handpicked the caterer, helped me choose between ivory and champagne dresses. She even wrote a speech for the reception, said it would make people laugh and cry. But slowly, her involvement started to feel like control. She questioned every choice that didn't involve her. You're doing peonies? Everyone does peonies. Be original, Meg. You're really letting your mom pick the ceremony song? Isn't this your day? And then there was the dress. I found the dress one quiet afternoon without her, a simple satin gown with a low back and delicate buttons. I sent her a photo from the boutique dressing room. She didn't reply for 2 days. When she finally did, all she said was, if you love it. Not I love it too. Not you look beautiful. Just conditional approval. That's when I started to wonder. James saw it too, in his own way. He was never the jealous type. If anything, he encouraged my friendship with Lila. But the closer the wedding got, the more he sensed the tension I didn't want to name. She doesn't like change, he said gently one night while we folded invitation envelopes. Especially not the kind that makes her feel left out. She's not left out, I argued. She's my maid of honor. I know, he said, sliding the gold-foiled card into an envelope. But she used to be the center of your life. Now she's orbiting. That word stuck with me. Orbiting. It sounded too far, too cold. But maybe that's what was really happening. The rehearsal dinner was where everything truly began to splinter. Lila showed up late, her dress too flashy for the setting, red lips too bold for the occasion. She made a toast that felt more like a monologue. Stories about our wild college days, our man-hunting missions, her voice dripping with nostalgia and double meanings. Then she looked at James and said, "Don't dim her light, okay? She's always been fire." It sounded like a compliment. But the room shifted. Even my mom raised an eyebrow. Later that night, I confronted her gently. "Was everything okay in your toast?" She shrugged. "Just reminding people who you used to be. Before all this domestic bliss." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The wedding day came. And it was perfect. At least on the outside. The sun cooperated. The music swelled at the right moments. I walked down the aisle and saw James's face. Steady, proud, kind. Everything I hoped for. Lila stood beside me, bouquet trembling slightly in her grip. After the kiss, during the reception, she pulled me aside. Her voice was hushed, but tight. "I hope you know what you're doing." I blinked. What? This life. This choice. It's forever. And sometimes, forever gets boring. She walked away before I could respond. I never saw her cry. Not during the vows, not during the speeches, not when she hugged me goodbye. She vanished the next day. No follow-up call, no thank you, no photos shared. Just gone. I spent the first day of the honeymoon defending her silence. She probably needs space, I told James. It's been emotional, but deep down, I felt it. Something had shifted. A line had been crossed. It wasn't just absence. It was withdrawal. A retreat fueled by bitterness. I kept rereading the message on the box she sent. For your honeymoon glow. Love you always, Lila. Was it sarcasm? Was it sincere? Or was it the last breadcrumb before something bigger? There's this assumption I've always carried. The belief that people who know your soul can't turn on you. That love, once earned, is permanent. Lila was supposed to be the safest place in my life. She had seen me ugly cry. She had seen me throw up in grief. She had held my secrets like sacred offerings. So I never imagined she'd be the one to weaponize them. I never imagined the person who once held my hair back would one day hold a knife behind her back, smiling the whole time. But that's the thing about betrayal. It never comes from enemies. It comes wrapped in satin ribbons. James was asleep when I finally opened the box. It was just after 3 a.m. I hadn't planned to do it. In fact, I'd promised myself I wouldn't. But promises get slippery in the quiet hours, especially when your stomach churns with questions and the room feels colder than it should. The ribbon came off too easily. The paper peeled away like it had already been opened, and resealed by someone who didn't want to be careful anymore. Inside was a folded white blouse. Simple, high-collared, vintage. I held it up, confused. It wasn't mine. It didn't look new. It smelled faintly of vanilla, and something else. Then I saw the photo. At the bottom of the box, beneath the blouse, was a single Polaroid. It was slightly curled, like it had been handled too many times. And in it was James, sitting on the edge of a bed I didn't recognize, shirtless, looking down, candid, vulnerable, intimate. Lila's hand was in the frame, unmistakable, with the silver thumb ring she never took off. Her fingers were wrapped around his wrist. My body went numb. The floor could have cracked beneath me and I wouldn't have noticed. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, trying to will it into fiction. Maybe it was edited. Maybe it was from years ago. Maybe it wasn't even him. But the mole on his shoulder said otherwise. The watch on the nightstand was his, a birthday gift from me. Last year. And the blouse, the one in the box. I remembered it now. She wore it to my bridal shower. The same day she spilled red wine on the sleeve and cursed under her breath when no one else was looking. I dropped it like it burned. At first I didn't cry. Shock is a cruel thing. It doesn't scream. It whispers. I sat on the bathroom floor with the box beside me and my heartbeat thudding like a war drum inside my skull. My reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, pale, glassy, half-formed, like someone halfway through a breakdown who hasn't realized they've already crossed the line. When James woke up and found me there, I was still gripping the photo in my hand. He froze in the doorway. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. He looked at the blouse, then the Polaroid, and something inside him, something I once trusted blindly, snapped. "Megan!" His voice cracked. I stood up slowly. "Was it during the wedding?" I asked, my tone quiet. Hollow. He stepped forward. "It was a mistake. It happened once. Before the wedding. I didn't know how to tell you." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was surreal. "You didn't know how to tell me. So she did?" He looked at the box, then at me, then down. And in that silence, every answer I didn't want arrived all at once. The next 48 hours unraveled like a fever dream. I left the villa, took the emergency card key and walked barefoot down the beach until I found another resort and booked myself into the first available room. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't feel anything but betrayal rippling through my veins like ice water. No calls, no messages. James knocked once the next morning. I didn't open the door. He slid a letter under it. I tore it in half without reading. The grief didn't hit me all at once. It dripped, slow, poisonous. My body felt like a stranger's. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I sat on the balcony for hours, watching strangers laugh by the pool and wondering how the world kept turning when mine had shattered. Lila didn't text. Of course she didn't. She had already delivered the final blow. with ribbon and paper and perfume. I checked my email 2 days later, mostly out of habit. That's when I saw it. A message from Lila, time-stamped 4:07 a.m., about an hour after I opened the box. Subject line, "No more lies." The body of the email was short. "I thought you should know. It wasn't a one-time thing. It started during your engagement party. He told me he loved you, but he kissed me anyway. You deserve someone who doesn't stray when you're not looking. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I'm not sorry you found out. L." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. It wasn't just the affair. It was the timing, the calculation. She waited until I was isolated, in love, far from home. In the most sacred week of my life, she wanted to destroy me at my highest point. And she succeeded. I broke that night. Fully. I screamed into a pillow until my throat went raw. I smashed a wine glass just to hear something break outside of myself. I called my mom, sobbing, unable to speak, just gasping, and then I hung up before she could ask anything. I didn't want comfort. I wanted silence. I wanted nothingness. Grief is messy. People talk about stages, denial, anger, bargaining, but they don't tell you that those stages don't happen in order. They happen all at once, on a loop, out of rhythm. I felt fury and shame at the same time, grief and clarity, love and hatred. I blamed Lila. Then I blamed myself. I replayed every memory, trying to find the moment where I lost control of my own story. Was it when I told Lila about my first date with James? Was it when I asked her to help me pick the venue? Was it when I let her give that speech at the reception? I wanted to find the precise second the knife entered, as if locating the entry wound would help me pull it out. But there was no clean incision. Just 1,000 little cuts I hadn't noticed until they bled all at once. And then came the shame. Not for what happened, but for what it revealed in me. The insecurity, the ego, the fear that maybe I wasn't enough. I'd built my identity on being the strong one, the one who held things together, the one who forgave easily, the one who made peace, even when it cost her pieces of herself. But this cracked me. And in that fracture, something else stirred. Not weakness, not rage, something quieter, colder, stronger, a new kind of clarity, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that plans. I stayed on the island 2 more days, didn't answer James's final message, didn't respond to Lila's email. I swam in the ocean at sunrise, ordered champagne at breakfast, took photos of myself that didn't look like me, hair unbrushed, face raw, eyes hollow. I wasn't healing, but I was feeling, and that was something. The night before I flew home, I took out the Polaroid one last time, stared at it under the bathroom light. Then I lit a match and watched it curl to ash in the sink. What they didn't realize is that I don't collapse for long. I don't scream forever. I don't stay broken. I've always been quiet. But quiet doesn't mean weak. It means you won't hear me coming when I return. And when I do, I don't come back for closure. I come back for justice. Grief doesn't always announce itself in sobs and snot and shattered photo frames. Sometimes it slips into your life like fog, barely there, but blinding. When I got back home from the honeymoon, that wasn't. The apartment felt like a museum. Our apartment. Still filled with the scent of jasmine and wood polish. Everything untouched. The suitcase landed with a dull thud on the hardwood, and I just stood there, staring at the table where we signed our wedding thank you notes. The orchid centerpiece was still alive, thriving even. It mocked me in silence. James had moved out, apparently. A note on the kitchen counter said so. "I'll give you space. I'll wait as long as it takes." I ripped it in half without reading the rest. Then I went to bed, with my clothes on, and didn't get up for almost 2 days. I'd never known what it meant to feel numb until those weeks. Not sad, not angry, just suspended. Days bled into nights. I watched TV without hearing it. I scrolled through Instagram with hollow eyes, pausing too long on wedding photos and deleting half of them. Lila's tag was still on a few. I blocked her. Friends texted. I replied vaguely. Just resting. Need a break. Talk soon. No one got the full story. How could they? How do you explain that the two people you loved the most chose each other over you, and then wrapped their betrayal in silk and called it a gift? I stopped returning calls. I didn't go back to work. I canceled every post-honeymoon brunch, spa day, and follow-up thank you meeting. The world kept moving. I didn't. Even my reflection felt temporary. I avoided mirrors, avoided myself. Who was I now, anyway? Not a wife, not a best friend, just debris. Then came the bad decisions. Not dramatic ones, subtle ones. The kind that eat at your edges without showing up in Instagram captions. I started drinking wine with breakfast, then skipped breakfast altogether. I texted my ex from college at 2 a.m., just to see if someone could still want me. He replied. We met. It was empty. But I smiled through it. I tried yoga, tried journaling, tried shopping, bought a ridiculous pair of heels I never wore just to feel something new on my feet. It didn't work. Nothing stuck. I even went to one therapy session. The therapist looked like my aunt. Warm, perfumed, glasses too low on her nose. I spent the entire 50 minutes talking about logistics. Where do I go from here? What do I do with the lease? How do I explain this to my boss? At the end, she said something soft. Have you allowed yourself to feel betrayed? I never went back. Because no, I hadn't. I was afraid that if I opened that door, the rage would be too big to manage. One night I got dressed up, curled my hair, wore red lipstick. I told myself it was time to move on. It was a friend's engagement party, a small one, nothing fancy. Just people I used to laugh with. I told myself I could be normal for 2 hours. Smile, clap, pretend. I walked in confident. Said hi to old friends. Held a champagne flute like I meant it. Then someone hugged me too tightly and said, You're so strong, Megan. After what happened, I don't know how you're standing. I blinked. What do you mean? She winced. Oh, I thought you knew. Lila posted a photo. The blood drained from my face. She deleted it fast, like within the hour, but someone screenshotted it. It was them, together, in Paris. Looked recent. Matching rings. Rings? My stomach dropped. I smiled weakly, excused myself, and walked to the bathroom. There, under flickering lights and peeling wallpaper, I crumpled. It was one thing to be betrayed, another to be paraded. Rings. Paris. Matching smiles. She was rewriting the story without me, positioning herself as the next chapter in my book without asking if the ink had even dried. And the worst part? People were watching it happen. I left the party early, tore off the lipstick on the Uber ride home, cried so hard my mascara ran down my neck. When I walked back into the apartment, I knew I had hit bottom. Not because of them, because of what I'd become since. Small, ashamed, silent. And if I didn't claw my way out now, I knew I never would. That was the night I opened my wedding planner again, not to reminisce, but to burn it. I went through every page, notes, budgets, dress sketches, guest lists. I read every message Lila had scribbled in the margins. Make sure we do lemon cake. You and James. Finally. I tore out the pages one by one and fed them to a shallow flame in the sink. It wasn't rage, it was release. When the last page was gone, I sat on the floor, legs crossed, heart strangely still. That's when the knock came. It was Evelyn, my downstairs neighbor. Mid-60s, thick gray curls, eyes like steel wrapped in velvet. I hadn't seen her in weeks. She lived alone with a cat and read mystery novels in the courtyard. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "You're scaring the plants." I blinked. "What?" She nodded toward my balcony. "Your ficus is dying, you haven't watered it, and I know you love that plant, which means whatever's eating you must be big." I almost laughed. Then she added, "Come down for tea tomorrow." I'll teach you how to prune damage without killing the roots. I didn't want to go, but I did. Something about her steadiness, her unapologetic way of seeing through me, made it hard to say no. That tea turned into a routine. Once a week at first, then twice. She never asked invasive questions. She just offered space, told stories, made soups. Let me sit with my pain without trying to fix it. One afternoon, she handed me a gardening book and said, "You've been living in winter, but seasons don't apologize for changing. Neither should you." That line stuck with me. Seasons don't apologize. Neither should I. I started rebuilding quietly. Small things. I washed the sheets, took down our wedding photos, made new playlists, relearned how to cook for one. I sent James a message. Not for him, for me. I release you. Not because you deserve peace, but because I do. He replied once. I never opened it. I needed space for someone else now. Me. The final cut came when my mother called and begged me to make peace with Lila. She's always been troubled, Meg. But she loved you. Maybe she still does. That was the moment I realized the full cost of healing. It meant giving up the version of love that demands my silence. I told my mother, if loving her means shrinking myself, I'm done. She cried, said I was being cruel. But I wasn't. I was choosing myself for the first time, and that required sacrifice. Not just of people, but of old identities. The peacemaker, the forgiver, the fixer. That version of Megan had to go, so someone stronger could take her place. It didn't happen all at once. Real transformation rarely does. It's not a movie montage. It's slow, deliberate, and quiet. Like muscle growing back over bone. Like skin learning how to feel again. I started waking up earlier. At first, because sleep felt like a betrayal. But eventually, because sunrise became a promise. That something new could begin again. I stopped drinking wine before noon. Stopped checking my phone for messages that would never come. I filled my calendar with structure. Mornings were for movement. Afternoons for work. Evenings for solitude, not sorrow. I found my old camera again, a Canon I hadn't touched since college, and started walking the city just to chase light. I'd forgotten how beautiful it was to witness things without needing to hold them forever. That camera, in a strange way, became my mirror. Through its lens, I remembered how to frame things, how to find beauty in cracks and corners, how to see without judgment. Work followed suit. I'd taken an extended leave from my job in marketing, but something in me resisted going back to the same office, the same desk, the same life that had quietly betrayed me while I wasn't paying attention. So I built something else. I launched a boutique branding studio from my apartment. Just me, my laptop, and a vow to work only with people whose values matched mine. My first client was a single mother starting a wellness business. The second, a therapist building an online course. Women rebuilding themselves, just like me. Each brand I shaped became a reflection of my own rebirth. Clean lines, bold fonts, soft strength. It worked, not because I was trying to succeed, but because, for once, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. Evelyn, my unexpected mentor, was the only person who knew how deep the transformation really ran. She noticed the subtleties before I did. "You're less afraid of silence now," she said one afternoon as we pruned her jasmine vine. "Before, you filled it too fast. Now you let it sit." I didn't know what to say, so I smiled. Sometimes silence says more than survival ever could. The real shift, though, the one that couldn't be tracked by planners or productivity, happened inside me. I no longer flinched when someone said Lila's name. I no longer imagined James when I lit candles in the bath. I no longer rehearsed confrontations in the mirror. There was peace. Not perfection, but peace. A quiet knowing that I didn't need an apology to heal. Then, something unexpected. A man named Daniel. We met through a client who hosted community workshops. He wasn't like James, not polished, not charming in the way that turns heads. But he was steady. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. He didn't flinch when I mentioned betrayal. He didn't try to rescue me. He just saw me. And that, after everything, felt revolutionary. We took things slow. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into dinners. No promises, no performances, just presence. I told myself I wasn't looking for love. But maybe love had been looking for someone like me, someone no longer willing to lose herself in the process. Nearly 8 months had passed since the box. 8 months since the honeymoon that broke me. And then, as life would have it, an invitation arrived, a gala, industry-wide, branding, design, marketing, startups. I'd been nominated for a small business award. The event was formal, public, press-heavy. At first, I didn't think twice. Then I saw the guest list. Lila would be there. So would James. Apparently, they'd co-launched a creative agency months ago. A glossy, pretentious studio built for influencers and ego. Power couple branding, the tagline read. I stared at the screen, not with fear, not with panic, but with something I hadn't felt in a long time, readiness. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about presence. The girl they betrayed had been soft, hopeful, naive. The woman walking into that gala? She was sovereign, rebuilt from bone, wearing the scars they gave her like medals. The hotel ballroom shimmered in gold. Strings of pendant lights hung like frozen fireflies, casting soft reflections on the marble floor. Laughter floated in delicate waves, and champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes behind conversations. The entire space felt curated, elegant, timeless. But it wasn't the room that made my heels pause at the threshold. It was them. Across the crowd, framed by a column of ivory roses and artificial grace, stood James and Lila. She was in black. Of course she was. Sleek, severe, modern. Her hair was swept into a knot that didn't dare move. A flash of diamond earrings, nothing subtle about them. James stood beside her in navy, too polished, too smooth, the way men do when they're trying to look unbothered. For a moment, neither of them saw me. I just stood there, watching them. Two people I once would have run toward. Now, they looked like strangers dressed in versions of their own ambition, as if intimacy had been replaced with branding, as if betrayal had styled them for the spotlight. And then, Lila's eyes found mine. She faltered, just slightly, just enough. A twitch in the corner of her lip. A flash of something. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. I stepped forward, slow and silent. Not rushing. Not chasing. I didn't need to make an entrance. I was the entrance. I walked through that ballroom like it was mine. Every movement deliberate, every breath calm. I felt the weight of the silk dress I'd chosen. Deep emerald, open back, minimal jewelry. Just the gold cuff on my wrist Evelyn had given me. For armor, she'd said. But make it elegant. As I passed clusters of guests, I saw the looks, the double takes, the whispered names. Not because I was causing drama, because I was the story they didn't expect to see again. Alive, unburned, glowing. Lila straightened her shoulders as I approached. She tried to meet me with a smile, brittle and just a little too late. Megan, she said softly, like we were old friends reconnecting across years, not wreckage. James opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. Just a little, and they stopped. Silence fell between us. I looked at them, both of them, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel anything at all. I wasn't here for apology or revenge. I was here to let them see what they lost. Not the wedding, not the friendship, me. Lila reached for her champagne glass, a stall, a defense. I've seen your work online, she said lightly, tilting her head. It's impressive. The pause was long enough to feel condescending. I smiled. a soft, knowing smile. Then I stepped a little closer and looked her in the eye. "You were right, you know," I said, my voice velvet-wrapped steel. "Forever can get boring. That's why you'll never have it." Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. But the room cracked open inside her, because she remembered saying those exact words to me. On my wedding day. She remembered the smirk, the power play. And now, they echoed back like a mirror she couldn't look away from. James shifted beside her. His jaw tightened. I turned to him slowly. We hadn't spoken since that night in the villa. Not one word. He was older now, somehow. Not physically, emotionally. Like guilt had aged him. Like he hadn't slept in weeks that could have been peaceful. He tried to hold my gaze, but I'd already left the room behind his eyes. I didn't need more than that. No monologue, no scene. Just presence. And the truth they now had to live with, that I had bloomed in the very ashes they lit. That they hadn't buried me. They'd freed me. I stepped back and nodded politely. Then I turned and walked toward the garden terrace, where fresh air waited, and so did the next chapter. Behind me, silence lingered. That was the sound of consequence. Not violence, not drama. Just the silence of two people realizing they'd built an empire out of betrayal, only to be haunted by the woman they tried to erase. A woman who didn't need to scream to win. She just had to show up whole. I never replied to his final message. It still sits unread in the archived corner of my inbox, like a letter from a past life. Unopened, undisturbed, irrelevant. I thought I'd revisit it someday. Maybe when I felt curious or nostalgic. But time has a way of softening those edges until you forget why you ever needed answers in the first place. The truth is, there are questions I no longer care to ask. Why he did it. When it started. If it meant anything. That kind of closure isn't healing. It's excavation. And I've already buried enough. Lila never reached out again. Not directly, at least. Once, a mutual acquaintance forwarded me a podcast episode she appeared on, some breezy chat about women in business, brand authenticity, and choosing yourself. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. She's the kind of woman who can spin anything into a narrative. But the truth isn't always what gets published. Sometimes it's what you carry in your silence. And mine? It speaks volumes. A few months after the gala, I packed up the apartment. Not in a rush, not with sadness. I just felt done. I folded the linen curtains into neat squares. Donated the wine glasses we'd picked out together. Took one last walk through each room, not to mourn, but to thank it. This was the place where I came undone, where I let myself grieve without apology, where I stitched myself back together with no one watching. I left behind the keys and the ghosts. I moved into a small cottage on the edge of the city. White walls, wooden beams. A little garden Evelyn helped me build. Lavender and sage in the morning light. It smells like starting over. The studio is thriving, not just financially, though that part helps, but spiritually. My work now feels like a mirror for other women stepping back into their power. Every brand I help create is a declaration, a reclamation. Last week, I helped a widow launch a business teaching grief journaling. The week before, a breast cancer survivor who wanted to sell headscarves she designed during chemo. We sit in Zoom meetings and cry sometimes, but there's laughter too. There's so much laughter. It's strange. How many of us had to lose everything to finally build something that's ours? Daniel is still around. He doesn't try to fix me. Doesn't need me to be anything I'm not. We make dinner together on Sundays. Sit in silence when the world feels too loud. He asks questions that aren't leading anywhere. Just gentle invitations to unfold. Sometimes we talk about what's next. Travel. Maybe a dog. Maybe nothing big at all. He once told me, "You don't owe anyone a grand comeback." He's right. Peace isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet mornings and strong coffee, and someone who makes space for your solitude. I still write letters I never send. It's a habit I picked up in therapy. The real kind this time. The kind that made me cry in the parking lot after the first session. The kind that stayed with me long after I left the office. There's one letter to Lila I wrote and then burned. It said, "I don't hate you. I just see you now, clearly, without the filter of friendship. And it breaks my heart how little you saw me. But I'm done grieving someone who was never really mine to begin with. And one to myself. You are not what they did to you. You are what you did after." That one I kept. Folded neatly into the back of my journal. Sometimes I read it on quiet nights, just to remind myself how far I've come. There's a tree in my backyard that blooms early. Too early, according to the neighbors. Every February, when the other branches are still bare, this one bursts into white flowers like it knows something the rest of us forgot. It's reckless, hopeful, beautiful. I sit under it often, book in lap, legs folded, hair tucked behind one ear. The wind moves through the petals like a whisper, and I feel it. Not regret, not loss, not even triumph. Just life. Messy, full, ongoing, and entirely mine.